Hello everybody and welcome to an all brand new preview Percy matchday preview experience type thing featuring research from the beautiful Daisy. The audio version is available in 4K UHD via the red button and the written version isn't. All sorts of new stuff to go through at the start of a brand new season, so pay attention, there's a good thing. So we open our season with a home match against Aston Villa at the Olympic. The TV companies picked this one up for TV coverage right from the start, meaning that you'll have to wait until 5:30 PM on Saturday for kickoff. Should be able to sneak in a swift dozen pints or so then. Maybe even more, because the new season seems to have taken the transport companies completely by surprise, as at the time of writing they seem to have failed to arrange anything in the engineering works department for trains into Stratford. Keep it under your hat just in case they change their mind. So Villa then, they've qualified for the so-called Champions League this season, having finished fourth in the league last time around. They did limp across the line to a certain extent with 2 draws and 2 defeats in their last 4, their earlier form enabling them to profit from what appeared to be a lack of desire on the part of most other clubs in that area of the table to actually try and qualify for Europe, in what is likely to be the most bloated competition ever. The format has been tweaked in an attempt to appease the sort of club that still might be thinking about a Super League. Villa's hopes of progressing further in the competition will have been tempered by their experiences last season, when, after months of looking forward to picking up the Thursday night Conference League trophy on the grounds of how difficult can it be if West Ham won it, the wheels came off in the semi-final against Olympiacos, a team, lest we forget, we effectively knocked out of the more senior Thursday night league competition. Villa are one of those clubs who may struggle with the profit and sustainability rules. That's easy for you to say. I'll tell you what, henceforth we'll call it PSR. The loss of £120 million before adjustments in 2022-23 meant that some serious cuteness needed to be applied to the accounts before the end of June, with profits from player sales being required to avoid a points deduction. All of that needed to be balanced with the need to maintain a squad capable of remaining competitive on both the domestic and European fronts. Happily for Villa, and many others, the wonderful world of accountancy was there to lend a hand. You see, there is a disparity between the accounting treatment of player purchases and player sales. If you sell a player, the transfer fee is booked into your accounts when the transfer is complete. However, for player purchases, the asset is treated as depreciating over 5 years, thus spreading the expense in the account over a similar period. Put very simply, if you buy a player for £50 million and then sell one for the same amount, you'll be credited with having received £50 million in that year against an expense of only £10 million. Look, stop yawning, this is very important. Anyhow, the perfectly legitimate taking advantage of what appears to be a bit of a flaw in the system saw them do a fair bit of business in advance of their 30th of June year end, which has kept the beautiful Daisy very busy with her new player research bit. Not that the arrival of striker Cameron Archer would have had much effect on the outgoing side of the books. Archer arrived on what was effectively a free transfer from Sheffield United. It's a return to Villa for the player who left for Hypocrisy Towers only a year ago. No doubt the fee of £18 million was noted on the incoming side of the ledger that year, though the Blades only paid £3 million of that up front. With Sheffield United having been hilariously relegated last season, and with the ignorant and gullible Lord Griffiths long having since departed this mortal coil, they found themselves either unwilling or unable to pay the rest of Archer's fee. So back to Villa the player went. Villa then spent £10 million to bring in the rather amusingly named Lewis Dobbin. They brought him in from similarly cash-strapped Everton in what was one of those account-busting swap deals that helped out both sides, with 21-year-old midfielder Tim Irogabaumnam, I think that's how you pronounce it, going to Goodison for £9 million. Mind you, Dobbin didn't hang around Villa Park for too long. He joined West Brom on a season loan at the start of August. More swapping occurred with the arrival of Dutch winger Ian Matson, whose fee of £37 million seemed rather a lot to me, even when you take into account the £19 million reportedly received for 18-year-old Omari Kellyman, which itself was probably rather a lot of money for an 18-year-old with but 2 league appearances under his belt for Villa. Matson spent 5 years on Chelsea's books as part of their loan stock of players seemingly employed purely for the purpose of being lent out to other clubs. Matson, who can function up and down the left-hand side as a fullback, wing-back or even an out-and-out winger, spent time at Charlton, Burnley, Coventry and, somewhat oddly, last season, Borussia Dortmund on loan before joining Villa. The 22-year-old has Dutch caps up to under-21 level. He's made the senior squad a couple of times but has yet to play, though he was a late injury replacement included in the Dutch Euro 2024 squad. Villa then played some more swapsies with Juventus. Winger Samuel Illing Jr. started his life as a kid on Chelsea's books again, before leaving at the age of 17 for Juventus. The 20-year-old made 36 league appearances for the old lady before moving back to Blighty in a deal valued at £14 million, with £3 million potentially coming in with add-ons. Also arriving from Turin was Argentinian midfielder Enzo Barrechea, valued at €8 million. Note I say valued at in each case. With Douglas Luiz going in the opposite direction, there's likely to have been a bit of horse trading involved. A couple more Everton connections ensued, with former Toffee Ross Barkley coming in for £5 million from Luton, and 10 times that amount being spent to the Toffeemen themselves for Amadou Onana. The transfers in list was completed, much to Daisy's relief, by Hull winger Jadon Philogene. He's another one returning to his original club due to an unusual deal. Hull accepted an £18 million bid from Ipswich, but Villa had a clause in the deal that took the player to Humberside in the first place, allowing them to match any bid, which they did. However, having inserted a sell-on clause in the original deal, Villa ended up paying only something like £13 million for the player. Well, that's enough of their ins. Let's move on, shall we, to the wild and wacky world of association football. Well, we had the Euros, in which an England side somehow bumbled its way to the final before coming up against the Spanish side, containing a player young enough to legally be my great-grandson, had I been traipsing around Spain way back when. Southgate got a lot of stick for continuing to select Harry Kane, who seemed hell-bent on not ruining his spotless record of having his career untainted by anything so tawdry as a trophy. Substitutions also appeared to be something of a mystery to the manager, bringing back memories of dear old Sir Alf Ramsey, who, bless him, at least had the excuse that substitutions at international level were a brand new thing back then. Still, given our record of losing players to injuries sustained on international duty, perhaps we should be grateful that the now departed Southgate didn't make greater use of Jarrod Bowen, who should therefore be fit to start the season. Elsewhere, and as we've seen with Villa, the world of football finances were much in the news over the summer. To lose one prospective buyer may be regarded as misfortune. To lose two looks like carelessness on the part of Everton. The deal for 777 Partners to take over at Goodison looked holed beneath the waterline for months before the deal finally collapsed, 777 being unable to actually show they had the wherewithal to complete the deal. Into the Friedkin Group, owners of Roma. It was a case of Veni Vidi Scarpa once the due diligence had been completed, leaving Everton back in limbo. More points deductions to come, perhaps. Leicester City may face similar sanction relating to the last time they were in the top flight, and any club in similar shtuck will no doubt be considering their position, given the revelation that Manchester United were given an allowance of £40 million to deal with COVID, a figure some 40 times what most other clubs were given. Look out for lots of asterisks in the points column of the league table as positions change after every extra meeting behind closed doors. And so on to us then. Well, we have been busy, haven't we? The board considered many options over the course of the closed season, rejecting their original plan to requisition each season ticket holder's firstborn to be sold off for medical experiments in favour of simply removing concessionary tickets for the young, the elderly and the infirm. This all took place as their latest attempts to pretend to engage with the fans were published, with nominations for a new fans advisory board being sought. On closer scrutiny from some supporters groups, the arrangements seemed to come with so many strings the whole thing resembled an episode of Thunderbirds. FAB indeed. The concessions issue brought condemnation from many sources, including none other than David Cross, who reportedly had been threatened with a ban from the hospitality suites for daring to question the wisdom of the board. Classy West Ham, very classy. On the personnel front, we should bid welcome to Julian Lopetegui, whose surname I fervently hope to have mastered by the end of the season. Formerly at Wolves a while back, he left when promised funds that were not forthcoming. Rest assured that standards here will be maintained, and no matter how difficult I find it to pronounce Lopetegui, I shall on no occasion refer to the manager as J-Lo. Anyhow, all of us at the Avram Grant Olympic Rest Home for the Bewildered say bienvenido and buena suerte to you, sir. With some of the boards seemingly distracted by something or other from their usual search for square pegs to fit in round holes, we finally managed to spend that money that was crying out to be spent back in January, with 8 players to date turning up. Brazilian youngster Luis Guilherme was first through the door, commanding a £25.5 million fee from Brazilian outfit Palmeiras. Still only 18, I'd say that's another wee bit of a gamble on a player who's just 30 first-team appearances in the Brazilian league to date. Though he is well regarded, and a newspaper's recent list of the best players born in 2006, yes, there is such a thing apparently, made a point of naming the youngster. We'll see. At the other end of the pitch, and indeed the other end of the age scale, came in Wes Foderingham. The much-travelled custodian arrived on a free from Sheffield United. On his CV was a spell at Swindon Town, where he incurred the wrath of none other than Paolo Di Canio, who was managing the Wiltshire outfit at the time. On being substituted by the Italian, Foderingham kicked a water bottle over, prompting Di Canio to announce that unless an apology was forthcoming pretty damn quickly, the keeper would be out on his ear. That's right, you read that right. Di Canio was threatening one of his players with the sack for having a temper tantrum. Online dictionaries containing definitions of the word irony are available. Fodering will slot into that not really playing role known as the Scott Carson position. Max Kilman is an interesting chap. Of Anglo-Ukrainian stock, he spent many years in non-league with the likes of Welling and Maidenhead, before making the leap to the Premier League with Wolves in one bound. He was also quite good at futsal, which, for the uninitiated, is the internationally recognised standard for the smaller form of the game. Sort of five-a-side with bells on. Amongst his futsal clubs was an outfit called Genesis FC. Presumably they featured Banks in goal, and a central defender partnership of Kilman and Hackett would be one to instil fear in the most prolific of forward lines. Killer, as one suspects he will inevitably be named, attracted the attention of the Ukrainian FA, who inquired of FIFA as to his availability for international selection. However, the inquiry was presumably not accompanied by the brown envelope FIFA usually expect on these occasions, as they pointed out that Killer's 30 caps for the England futsal team meant that he was tied to England for the rest of his life. Still, on the bright side, the transfer deal means that Alan Devonshire's Maidenhead will be about £4 million richer as a result of a sell-on clause when they flogged the player to Wolves. Next in was Crescencio Somerville, who, to save my spell checker on this laptop from having some sort of existential crisis, I shall rechristen Jimmy. £25 million is enough to prize the left winger from Leeds. No full international recognition as yet for the 23-year-old Dutchman, and yes, I've already done that joke. He came through the Feyenoord youth system, but failed to make a league start for the Rotterdam side, spending time out on loan at Dordrecht and our old friends Den Haag, before ending up at Elland Road. Next, we signed a striker. Yeah, really. Niklas Füllkrug arrived for about £27 million from Borussia Dortmund. Germany's oldest international debutant for 20 years, he was part of their squad in the recent Euros and scored against Scotland, though I suppose that's not the greatest of recommendations. He's got 13 goals in 21 international appearances and is known as Gappy, or only in German, due to the arrangement of his front teeth, though he's no Nobby Styles. Other dentally related information located by Daisy includes the fact that in his time at Werder Bremen, he ended up in hospital with a teammate's tooth embedded in his forehead following a training ground accident. Defensive midfield options have been bolstered with the arrival of Argentinian international Guido Rodriguez, who arrived at the conclusion of his contract with Real Betis. A former teammate of Edson Alvarez at Mexican side America, he admits to having spoken with his fellow midfielder before coming to his decision to exchange Spain for Stratford. We've got one loan signing in at the moment, in the form of Jean-Claire Todibo, who's arrived from Nice in a loan deal that allegedly contains an obligation to buy for £40 million should he start more than 5 league games. Probably best then not to dwell on his unwanted record of becoming the recipient of the fastest red card in Ligue 1 history, clocking in at an eye-watering 9 seconds. Daisy tells me that his competitive international debut for France came in a 14-0 trouncing of Gibraltar, though to be fair, the word competitive is doing some pretty heavy lifting there. What at the time of writing seems to be likely our final signing of the window was the £15 million deal that brought Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Man United. That deal was much anticipated, though it seemed to take a lifeline to trundle over the line. Think Zamora's winner against Preston that year. The talk was that there was some haggling over a bonus the player was owed by his now former employers. That being sorted, he finally pitched up to do all that posing in the new kit stuff that seems to be compulsory on these occasions. Wan-Bissaka's come a long way to overcome his third world origins in New Addington, an area so deprived that even the rest of Croydon looks down on it. So bid him a welcome, but think twice should he offer you a lift. He's got a fairly hefty rap sheet for motoring offences. So what's it going to be like on Saturday evening then? Well, there's some changes to VAR for a start. They'll be trialling, but not actually using, a semi-automatic offside system with a view to using it properly from October. All well and good, but they've elected to use a different system to that which looked okay in the Euros. There will also be a referee's call, similar to cricket's umpire's call. Good luck with that. Still, whilst they still have shied away from having to explain themselves to the paying crowd, they have said that decisions will be explained on whatever Twitter's called this week as live as is humanly possible. Look forward to Liverpool being awarded another dodgy goal because Donald Trump said it was onside then. The match itself? Difficult to call really. Loads of new players require time to bed in, and it's difficult to say how many of them will start for either side. However, new season optimism and all that, so I'll base my prediction purely on the feel-good factor of us potentially having some sort of squad depth for a change. So the £2 I was going to send to the club to contribute to Baroness Brady's next bonus, in case taking money from the young, elderly and infirm doesn't quite provide enough, will be digitally input into a wager at Mr. Winston's Turf Accountancy app on a 2-1 victory in our favour. Enjoy the game.